Welcome, everyone, to the December 2024 Ward 5 NPA meeting. I'm Jason Van Drysch. I'm facilitating this meeting, and I'm a member of the steering committee. Why don't we start by introducing the rest of the folks on the steering committee? Start over this way.
Hi, I'm Maria Mercurio. I am note-taking tonight.
Kathy Foley, doing nothing, I'm participating.
There is Rita somewhere.
Rita's hiding. He always hides.
All right, let's keep going around.
Jack Tiano.
And Fareed is somewhere. He's a member of the steering committee and responsible for the food. Can I have the agenda back on the screen? If that's possible. Oh, wait. What's that? Oh, that's right. Lena, another member of our steering committee, is remote. Lena, would you like to say hey and introduce yourself? Oh, not here yet. Okay.
She appears, she'll be in the column on the right.
Okay.
We'll share your intro slides in a second.
Perfect. Thank you. So as always, the Ward 5 NPA is a space for everyone in Ward 5, because by definition, the NPA is everyone in Ward 5. If you are a resident of Ward 5, you are a member of the NPA. And the steering committee exists to help make these meetings happen, but really the action is all of you who show up, whether it's in person or virtually. So thank you for being here. This is a safe space and an accessible space. We want this to be a place that works for everyone to participate. To that end, we have a community meal at every meeting, and invite folks to come just for the food, if that's what works, and stay for the conversation if it proves to be good. We look to engage with all community members and respect cultural and economic differences and value diverse perspectives. So we invite anyone and everyone to share your thoughts, questions, concerns, ideas about the South End, and just to do so in a respectful manner. Finally, we are nonpartisan. The NPA does not, and the steering committee do not endorse political candidates. So that's kind of the basics, the ground rules for our meeting tonight. We move to the agenda.
The agenda just quickly.
Yeah, do you have it available? So tonight is a pretty simple meeting because we're nearing the end of the year and lots of folks are busy with other things. So we decided to focus on an extended public forum, if folks are so inclined, for any concerns, ideas, thoughts that people might have, both immediate things that are going on and, things that you think the NPA should focus on next year. One of the things that we're really proud of as a steering committee is that we have started to make the NPA a sort of active source of bringing together ideas, people, conversations, as opposed to simply presenting whatever people ask to present. We, of course, accommodate requests to present, but we really try also to raise themes and concerns that are of interest to Ward 5. So if anybody has any thoughts on things that you would like the NPA to focus on next year, please bring that up, and we will definitely fold that into the steering committee's thinking about the year to come. And then after the public forum, we have our two state reps, Tiff Bluemle and Bram Kleppner, who very kindly agreed to join us tonight and share some thoughts on the upcoming legislative season and hear your thoughts on what you'd like them to be focusing on for this upcoming legislative season. So that's the agenda for tonight. And with that, I will open the public forum. Would anyone like to raise a concern, share an idea?
I'd like to say something.
Please go ahead. And if you could just say your name and if you like where you live in Ward 5, but not necessary.
Hello, my name's Max Medina. I live near Smalley Park and Carrie's Quick Stop, and I've been working with Andy, Greg, and some other people on stuff for Callahan Park. I attended a recent parks meeting that was reviewing Greg's application for pennies for parks for benches at Callahan Park, and it seemed like it was approved, and they will be moving forward with that. So, more places to sit at Callahan Park should be coming soon, hopefully.
Awesome. Thank you. Could you, do you want to say a little bit more about like where the benches are going to be and things like that? Is that known yet, or is that still to be determined?
I think that's still to be determined.
Got it. Well, that's great. Thank you for sharing that news. Others? Come on up.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming. My name is Fareed. I'm a member of the steering committee for Ward 5. I'm also a volunteer for the People's Kitchen. And this year we are working with the Dad Guild to do a toy drive. We are looking for toys and warm blankets to be given to families that are on our free food program. This is our 5th year of doing this, so we are looking for new unopened toys for children ages 0 to 12. You can drop off the toys at the Dad Guild's office at the soda plant on Pine Street, or at the People's Kitchen at 44 Ledgemere Street. And also text or call 802-491-3491 to arrange pickup. And if you want to contribute financially, anything sent to our Venmo account, People's Kitchen VT, or our PayPal account, same username, People's Kitchen VT, would go a long way to make sure that everyone we serve will be starting the new year with a new toy and will be a little warmer with new blankets. We're looking for blankets that are like fleece or wool. Thank you.
Location or drop off location.
Soda plant on Pine Street.
There are a lot of businesses.
Yeah, so it's the Dad Guild is on the 2nd floor. That's their office there. So, oh yeah, you guys are just across the street, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, and by the way,
Just down the
thanks
hill.
for the food.
Yeah, thanks for the food again. We're so lucky. Burlington is pretty known for some decent food, but we could be in anywhere food
Oh, thank you.
park or something. I mean, amazing food.
Thank you.
all place.
Others?
Just one thing from the CETO world. Hi, everyone. My name is Zach Nersinger. I work for CETO. I have 2 points to say. First one is we have for the next couple of weeks, the Memorial Block redevelopment online survey has about 2 more weeks left on it. That survey's been up since beginning of November. And what we're looking for is public input on what types of civic space uses that we could potentially see there and what the community would like to see there as those potential uses. And whether they're indoor uses or outdoor uses for the areas that we're looking at in that study, which is Memorial Auditorium, the properties along Main Street. That's kind of our bigger redevelopment area. And also folded into that is the what would be like the preservation of Fire Station 1 there and how it could be folded into that as well. The library and the church will remain, but we want to respect those uses there and how we can support those uses and kind of connect to those uses if the block were to be redeveloped in this vision and conceptual work that we're working on. So online survey open until January 3rd. Visit the CETO website. I have a couple QR codes popped up around town, like at the Fletcher Free Library, at the Old North End Community Center, at City Hall. But you can find your way on the CETO website. It's on our Instagram. It's in a lot of places. I will lose track of all the places I put it, but it is pretty easy to find. Second is I want to introduce our NPA specialist who was just hired and started this week. Shawnee Corey will be joining. There we go. Shawnee will be joining all of the NPAs in that position that has been vacant since the end of August for CETO. If you've been around to other NPAs, myself and others have been volunteers helping to keep things afloat while we searched for our new hire, and Shawnee is here now, this third day.
Yeah.
Third day, here we go. Keep things moving. We're happy to be here. So you'll see Shawnee a lot more, and I'm here to help with the transition and get Shawnee caught up to speed. So as you guys have been doing, if you have questions, please feel free to email both of us. We're also both tied into that NPA at burlingtonvt.gov email as well, but we'll keep things going and make sure the transition is as smooth as possible. So thank you everyone for your support while I tried to support you guys.
Thank you, Zach, and a big thank you to you and the others at CETO who stepped in and took on extra work to help keep supporting the NPAs in the meantime. So appreciate that.
Happy to do it.
Others? Yeah, go ahead.
I love the soapbox. And if we're doing extended public forum,
Do your part and say something long.
yeah, I love saying something. It's nice when you don't have a 2-minute time limit. So I guess the thing that's been on my mind, and to kind of tie into one of the earlier themes of the NPA this year, there was a moment in the spring where we kind of in public forum had an emergent conversation around traffic safety and safe streets and the kind of discomfort and of being a pedestrian or being outside of a car really on some streets. Especially in our neighborhoods. From there, we kind of took that, and over the summer at one of our summer barbecue hangouts in the park, we kind of expanded on that a little bit and started dreaming a little bit more about what our streets could look like if we started rethinking what their use could be. That was another time that I got a really nice long soapbox to a pre-planned, just kind of chat about street design and how that makes people feel safer and moves people along. And so this past week, I've been in a bunch of different meetings around the city that has had me feeling kind of bummed a little bit around where the city is kind of heading, both the direction that it's heading and the speed at which it's going in that direction, around really rethinking the city as what our transportation system looks like for the future and how we get there. And I don't really know what I want to say to you all, but just I think it's an important conversation to keep having with more and more people. I think specifically what is worth communicating, right? So the first, I'll just be specific, right? So like earlier this week, we passed, the city council passed like a new version of the Winooski Bridge and the intersection that leads into it on the Burlington side. There was a lot of advocacy to kind of like make that as safe and forward thinking as possible to meet kind of the city's lofty transportation and climate goals. And while it is a huge improvement over the current bridge, which is probably one of the least safe places to be outside of a car in Burlington, it really wasn't very forward thinking. And a lot of people were frustrated with how that process played out. And beyond that, I've been serving as I'm on the Burlington Walk Bike Council, where we try to get the city, or we don't really have any power, but we use our city appointed position to kind of try to push the city in the right direction. So I serve as a representative on the PAC, which I still don't know what that stands for, but kind of like a board that guides a project on the safety update for the walk bike plan, which is, I think, even more kind of directly related to what we were talking about as an NPA over the summer. And it's also just one of those things that's making me feel frustrated about kind of the direction that it's going. It's very focused on like federal funding, and it ends up becoming a big bureaucratic process of like, we have to do this because the feds want this, and this is the design standard. And it's not really about how do we make our cities, how do we make our streets safer and more accessible to everyone? So all of this to say, I think there's still a lot of work to do. And the more that people kind of know about where we're at and where we're going, and that there's still a lot of work to be done, and there's a lot of always opportunity and need for people to stay engaged and stay involved in this process. there's a lot of institutional momentum, not just in Burlington. This isn't a problem with Burlington. This is, a nationwide problem in terms of how we've kind of developed our transportation system over the last 70 years or so. And as we're trying to like claim this vision of a Burlington that's safer and more human scale and more climate friendly for the future, there's a lot of big questions that we need to grapple with. And we've kind of staked out some of those goals, like our carbon reduction or our net zero energy goal. But it's like where the rubber meets the road in terms of how we actually make those changes, where I think we, could benefit from more people plugging in and speaking up. So I hope that felt specific enough to feel actionable, or maybe not actionable, but if you're wondering how you can, actually plug in, or if this is something that interests you, you can always talk to me. I know way too much about what's going on in kind of the transportation and active transportation world. And this doesn't even touch on public transit, which is something that I hope we can talk about with our reps later on. Anyway, that's my extended public forum soapbox about transportation and whatnot. So
When you say it wasn't forward thinking enough, what can you describe what you think is forward thinking? I'm trying.
yeah, I mean, so, and this might be controversial, but we as a city have a net zero energy plan that wants to eliminate ground transportation emissions by 2030. And we also have a stated goal of reducing car mode share or single occupancy vehicle mode share in favor of transitioning more people onto walking, biking, and public transit, and carpooling and car sharing, but just not single occupancy vehicles. And part of that is going to require, just, by the way that this works, reallocating more of our infrastructure towards those other modes, just even in a physical space perspective, but also kind of reducing the overall capacity for car traffic. And I say it's controversial because a lot of people hear that and think making traffic worse, making things harder to use. But a lot of more recent research kind of shows how traffic, just like when you add more lanes, traffic demand is induced. More people say, oh, there's more room, I'll drive instead of, that becomes the more lucrative option or the more appealing option. The reverse is true where when you reduce, so to be specific, I'm setting up this background, I think we really should have had dedicated cycling and walking tracks. Right now there's multi-use paths that kind of put, instead of bikes in the road in conflict with cars, it's now bikes on the sidewalk on the multi-use path in conflict with pedestrians, which is, better for cyclists, but then at the expense of pedestrians. And I think we got them to widen it a little bit more. And I think, any breathing room will be helpful, but ultimately, I think it pits people against each other when we should be making room for everyone to move with dignity and speed at the speed that they travel at, instead of kind of reducing the mobility options for cyclists or reducing the utility for cars. I think when everyone can choose the mode that best makes sense for the trip that they're making, I don't know, you end up in a better situation. So specifically, I think it has too many lanes, and I don't think that the shared active transportation facilities are helpful, and the lanes are too wide. They made the lanes wider than they are on the bridge right now, which will make speeds faster and induce further demand, and also increase the speeds, which will increase the risk of serious injuries or deaths when crashes do occur. So
One thing that I've really learned from talking with Jack that I'd like to add on here is that I've had some of the same frustration for the last 10 years. And one thing that's come into focus in the last year or so is that making our streets more attractive and safer for walking and biking, and improving our bus system isn't just about making life better for people who want to do that. It's a blocker, a fundamental condition that needs to be met if we actually want the city to grow. Because if we want to add 6, 8, 10,000 people to Burlington, if we want to grow our tax base such that it actually gets back down into the realm of affordable to live here, because we've spread out the taxes across more people, more businesses, that's going to hit a wall pretty fast if all of those new people get around Burlington the same way that people do now. It will just result in deadlock. So even for people who aren't particularly psyched about biking or walking, investing in bike and walk infrastructure is part of the key to making Burlington a place that can actually grow. Because we can't grow given our current street grid if our main way of getting around is driving along. Andy, yes.
I just want to add something to that. Can I grab one of these tonight? Thank you, Pat. Not very far. Okay. Hi, my name's Andy Simon. This is definitely one of those areas of discussion that when you're thinking about next year and what we need to talk about at the NPA and focus on, this is one of those things, you know, walking and biking in Burlington, but also being safe in a car, all of those things. And one of the things that I keep being struck by is, as much as I admire the engineers and the workers and all the people who work for the city and Department of Public Works, when it comes to imagination in terms of doing something different or even pushing the Federal Highway Administration to think about something differently, or VTrans, the Vermont Transportation Agency, they don't do it. It's a failure of imagination. And one of the examples of that, I think, just only one of the many examples of that, is roundabouts. We have one roundabout up here. While we're all still learning how to use it best, as Steve pointed out in Front Porch Forum today, we are immensely blessed by having this roundabout here instead of what was there previously, or having a stoplight. But all of the different planning venues that we've come up against in the last few years, the Champlain Parkway, closing off the plan to close off the end of Pine Street, the rail yard enterprise project, which is on the books now and is coming up. The Winooski Bridge is another example. I can think of 3 or 4 or 5 other examples where a roundabout, and here I'm channeling the late great Tony Reddington, who was a great champion of roundabouts everywhere and in Burlington. And all of these places would be made better with a roundabout application instead of a stoplight. But we, in this case, I'm thinking of the planners at DPW, always go back to stoplights. And stoplights are one of the worst possible ways to manage an intersection. We've all gotten used to them, but we've also all gotten used to people running red lights in increasing frequency and making their own life, putting their own life at risk, walkers, bikers, other drivers. And the more that traffic flows around a roundabout and through the city, the less frustration there is for drivers as well as other people. So I'm just calling for more imagination in terms of highway planning, because highway planning, as Jack and Jason pointed out this summer, is key to highway safety. So that's for our next discussion too. Thank you.
Can I say?
Yeah, just if you don't mind, just introduce yourself first.
Yeah, I'm Dave Foss. I live at Decker Towers here in Great Ward 5. I was wondering if the NPA could go back to focusing some more on the South End Community Center, and by maybe putting some guidance in that area, maybe we can come up with some of these alternative transportation modes, and maybe that will create a tidal wave from that end, work its way through the city, because I saw a lot of things about the the new potential properties over there, there was a lot of talk about bikes and walking and making a transit hub. And where I live in Decker Towers, the traffic is, with all the construction too, the traffic is insane. People, they're impatient, so they go fast through those zones. I've seen a lot of people close to being hit, if not touched by cars and stuff like that. And then, I don't know, I think the NPA was great last year on trying to get ideas for the South End Civic Center or the community center. And people were taking notice and listening to some of our suggestions over there. Maybe we could push that a little bit more skin in the game down there, or I don't know. I think if we get people excited about that, they'd be excited about the idea of maybe safer roads and sidewalks and all that. So
Anyone else before we shift over to a conversation with our state reps? Go ahead.
Just on the matter of walking in Burlington, I walk downtown a lot, and it would be great if some of these crosswalks were better lighted, especially in the winter. I'm dressed in dark clothing. If I don't have a fluorescent band on and crossing some of these streets, the drivers just can't see us. So that's my comment.
So we've got some, it sounds like there's interest next year in continuing with some of the themes that we have started with in the past year, which makes a lot of sense because they're both big, bold endeavors that are not done. So we will pick up the themes of community center and safer streets in our planning for next year. And you can always reach the steering committee at what is our Google Groups email? Do you know, Maria, off the top of your head? Yep. So that email goes to all the members of the steering committee and is a good way to check in about anything that you'd like to see on the radar. Yeah. Great. Lena, hey, welcome. And if you want to just take a quick minute to introduce yourself as a member of the steering committee, and then if you have any thoughts, we're at the tail end of the public forum.
Hi, sorry I can't be there with y'all tonight. I have a cold and want to keep my germs to myself. Looks like a great crowd. Miss you all. I'm Lena, I use they, them pronouns. I'm on the NPA steering committee. I live up on Maple Street in the north end of the south end, or the south end of downtown, depending on who you ask. And I was watching on YouTube and I had to join on Zoom before the shift to discussion with our reps, just because I really appreciate your comment, Dave, about the community center, and I was very much involved with that work and really enjoyed getting to think in a new way about what our civic space can look like in the South End. And I think the reason I felt like that project was impossible is that our systems and the way that resources flow are designed to basically make it impossible for communities to determine how resources are allocated in our own neighborhoods. And the amount of money and the amount of time it would take to get a functioning community center up and running with all of the conditions, all of the amenities that would actually make it do what we need it to do is totally out of reach for communities, even ones like Ward 5, in which we do have folks of higher socioeconomic status. And I guess partially a comment, but more than anything, a question for all of us is like, what exactly are we doing if we're paying these property taxes that are ruining people's lives, and still can't get any sort of civic and social infrastructure that makes it feel worthwhile to live in our neighborhoods in the first place. And so I know it's not going to be a pretty session in the legislature. And thank you, Tiff and Bram, for doing the tough, ugly work there. And I want to encourage you to bring this question with you, right? Like, we're paying in, right? And I want to see us having access to the kind of space and the kind of resources that it feels like taxes are for, and that it feels like the government's job is to provide, right? And I know there are so many limitations on development and so many limitations on making resources available to people, but I think that we have a lot of questions to ask ourselves if we're living in a society and in a situation in which it's impossible for a group of people who deeply care about each other to access a community space. Like, what's up with that? So just couldn't help but pop in. Thanks for letting me drag out public forum a little bit longer, and excited to be with you all in person in another month.
Thank you, Lena. Hope you feel better soon. Yeah, let's switch gears now. We have our current rep and our rep-elect here with us, which is fantastic. And so I'd ask that you start just by introducing yourselves for folks who don't know you, maybe just a little bit of background of how long you've been on the legislature in Tiff's case, or not at all in Bram's, and what brought you to this work, what you've been doing before. And then I'll queue up a few more questions just to get us going and then see where we go from there. So Tiff, why don't you start with a quick intro?
Sure. So I've lived in Vermont in Ward 5 for about 28 years, and live in the Five Sisters neighborhood. And I ran for office during COVID, because finally people were talking about issues that I had spent a whole portion of my life talking about, but nobody was really, it never caught traction, like the importance of childcare to the economy, even talking about what is what's essential work and what are we paying people to do that work. And I wouldn't have run except for the fact that Joey Donovan decided not to run. And somebody had to ask me, because I was a very happy advocate, but I'm really glad I ran. I've learned a ton. It's not, I don't find it easy, because there are so many needs. But I sit on the appropriations committee, which exposes me to all the needs, and the responsibility for trying to sort through those needs, which this year will be much harder than it has been the last 2 years. And I'll turn it over to Bram.
To make things easier, why don't we just give you each a mic, and that way you don't have to swap back.
My name's Bram Kleppner. I live in Ward 6, where I have lived for 3+ decades. And I spent 10 years at Ben & Jerry's, where I worked with Pat, those many years ago, mostly doing international business development, international marketing. I did co-lead Ben & Jerry's first anti-global warming campaign, and also led the development of Ben & Jerry's first non-GMO ice cream. And then I went to Danforth Pewter, where I was CEO for 13 years. And continuing in the vein of being interested in business as an engine for social justice. We built a solar farm and put the company on track to zero fossil fuel use, and instituted company-wide profit sharing and partially paid maternity leave, and added an employee seat to the board, which was really entertaining how uncomfortable it made the board members. That made me really happy. And transitioned out of full-time work at the end of April, planning to ride my bike every day in May and then look for work in June. But 4 days after my last day at Danforth, Tiff's district mate, Gabrielle Stebbins, called and let me know she was not planning to run for re-election and offered her endorsement if I ran, which was far too nice an invitation to decline. Running a business, I got involved in public policy because rising healthcare costs were crushing us as a small rural manufacturer in Addison County. And so I did serve on Governor Shumlin's Business Advisory Commission, Council on Healthcare Financing, and co-chaired the Medicaid and Exchange Advisory Board for 5 years, and then served on the Tax Structure Commission. And then I think because we had put Danforth on the path to zero fossil fuel use, was appointed to the Vermont Climate Council to represent Vermont manufacturers, which was slightly cheating since my views do not represent the average view of Vermont manufacturing leaders. As we head into the legislature, as Tiff said, there are a lot of big, complicated, interlocking problems and limited resources with which to deal with them. And we have to deal with them. So I think we've sort of roughed out which of these big issues we're going to talk about. Do you want to?
Well, and we want to make time for all your questions. I think it's useful to start with a little bit, just a summary. We got a overview of kind of where the state economy is at the beginning of December. And the good news is that total revenues are 5% above what was projected. That's mostly in the general fund. The education fund is behind, but probably will catch up. We have the second lowest unemployment rate in the country. There are 2 open jobs for every unemployed worker in the state. I just met with the Commissioner of Health today with some other legislators, and we asked them about what they expected to change with the coming administration, because I think that the Agency of Human Services is most likely to be most affected by the change in administration. And,
by administration, you mean at the national?
The national level, sorry. Yep. And I mean, you don't want to cry wolf and get all hot and bothered before we see what's going to happen, but they certainly are playing things out. And, the healthcare department, 2 of every $3 are funded through the feds. So we rely on federal money to a great degree in order to support the kind of work that the health department does. And there's only 10% from the state general fund. The rest are grants, usually federal grants. Healthcare subsidies through the exchange are due to expire in 2025. So what that does to the number of insured is uncertain. But we know that healthcare premiums are at a premium right now, and way out of reach for folks. So they are looking at that and trying to figure out what the health department can and ought to do to protect as many Vermonters as they can through coverage. We face the federal government right now could shut down tomorrow. God, I'm sounding like Debbie Duff. downer. I'm just trying to paint a picture, like we have good revenues and we don't know what's going to happen when the new administration comes in. You know, the good news is there's a lot of the grant money that was issued through different Biden programs have either all been allocated in full, right up front, or there are commitments over a period of years. So that is, those dollars are less likely to be cut from us because they would have actually claw it back. I think that what state officials are most worried about is Medicare funding and Title I money for special ed. And I'm just now talking about kind of the fiscal the fiscal impact of administration policies. So it's really hard for state officials to finalize budgets right now because they're trying to anticipate what they need to protect and what to prioritize. The Democratic caucus, however, has set its priorities, and I don't think you'll be surprised by them. Housing, education, finance that can lower property taxes, and stabilizing our healthcare system, which is, and by that we really mean right now hospitals that are on the verge of financial, do I say collapse? I mean, the Oliver Wyman report was pretty clear. So there are right now, so Bram's going to talk about education, finance, and healthcare. And I'm going to talk about housing, and then we'll just open it up for questions if that's okay. Okay.
Yeah, as I said, these things are sort of all connected. High property taxes are, part of the unaffordability of housing in general, and property taxes are driven by high education spending, and the fastest growing part of that is healthcare spending. So it's all through line connected. With property taxes, I mean, Lena asked, geez, we're spending, we're paying this huge amount of money and we can't build a community center. Like, what's up? But if you look at your property tax bill, I think statewide average, like 65% of it is for education. So the amount that we're actually paying to the city for the sidewalks and the cops and the parks and the firefighters and all that other, the library, is a pretty small part. There's some towns where the education part of the property tax bill is as high as 85% of the total bill. And over the years, a number of people have looked at this, and Vermont's education financing system is unique and uniquely complicated because we are highly committed to providing equal educational opportunities to every kid in the state. We had a Supreme Court decision that said the way we did it for 200 years is unconstitutional. It's meaning that kids in wealthy towns can get a much better education than kids in poor towns. And the Supreme Court, so that is A, fundamentally morally wrong, but B, contrary to our Constitution, which guarantees equal opportunity. So we started the system that Tiff alluded to, where 130 different towns all vote on their school budgets, and then they mail all those bills to Montpelier, and they get a stack of 130 bills that they've got to pay for, and jiggering around with the homestead property tax rate and the non-homestead property tax rate and the property tax refund for people who are income sensitized, monkeying around with all that every year to end up with the right amount of money to pay 130 invoices from 130 towns. Over the years, people have said, A, this is impossibly complicated, nobody understands it. B, it doesn't seem to be producing the equality of outcome that it was designed to. And C, property taxes are crushing us and people are losing their homes over it. And a number of commissions and studies have looked at it, and a handful of them have come to the same conclusion, that instead of this impossibly complicated mix of property and income, and like 65 to 70% of Vermont households pay their education tax, at least partially based on income. There have been sort of relatively regular and consistent recommendations that the education tax be moved entirely to income and not be associated with property values anymore. And I think this is a good idea for a few reasons. One, complexity is its own form of injustice. People really don't know how their vote on town meeting day on their school budget is going to affect their property taxes. They think, if I vote to cut my school budget, my property taxes will go down, and that is not what happens. In the relationship, someone at the Department of Taxes told me it takes something like 27 separate calculations to figure out how your vote on town meeting day will affect your property taxes. And, there may be 3 people in the state who can actually figure that out. And none of us are one of those 3. So there's the complexity and the injustice of that. There's also the fact that property tax is a relatively regressive tax, that it hits, a poor person living in a $150,000 home and a rich person living in a $150,000 home pay the same property tax, even though it is much more burdensome for a low income person than a high income person. So it's more regressive than income tax. And it is, in fact, property tax, property values between 2000 and 2018, at least that data set, are more volatile than income, kind of contrary to popular belief and what one might initially sense. So in terms of making how we fund education fairer and simpler and more sustainable, I think moving it to an income tax is something we can do. It's something we can do that will reduce property taxes by 65%, and something we can probably do relatively quickly. I think sort of the August 2026 property tax bill is the one where people would see that their bill's gone down from $6,000 to $2,000, or whatever it may be. There are forces arrayed. The forces of evil are arrayed against us. I'm speaking rather flippantly there. But there are people who, just feel that we've done it this way for several hundred years, and it ain't working great, but it ain't completely broke, so let's not mess with it. There are no other states who do it based entirely on income, so it does feel that we would be, be the first with a big major tax policy, which is scary because you don't have data on how it worked in other states. There are other people who feel that it is a sneaky way to tax the rich, because the education income tax would be progressive in a way that property taxes are not, which means higher income earners would pay a higher percent.
That's the point.
Yeah, I would say as the advocates that I know are not trying to hide that fact at all. They think it's great. It is a large and radical change. And, I am, the thing that makes me think that it is possible this session is that there are 180 legislators who just got elected, and every single one of them heard from their constituents how burdensome property taxes are and how painful it is and how it's messing up their lives. And the governor also heard that during his campaign, and the state treasurer also heard that during his campaign. So there may be enough pressure from the people of Vermont to do something meaningful about property taxes to allow us to actually do something meaningful.
Can I ask a question before you go on?
I was
from-
gonna say, before I go on to,
Yeah.
am I supposed to do healthcare next?
You are.
Thanks, Tiff. Before we go to healthcare, let's talk about property taxes.
So if you were to switch to an income tax, what counts as income? So for instance, if someone is retired and they're drawing down a retirement account, does that count as income and is it taxed? What parts of are there parts of what people consider to be income that actually legally aren't? And if so, what do you do about that to make it fair?
Yeah, so savings, including retirement accounts, don't count as income. Retirement accounts, if it is a tax-free, a 401k, if it was tax-free going in, it's taxed when it comes out.
Or
But
vice versa?
yes, or vice versa. Like the money gets taxed at some point, but it doesn't get double taxed.
So that would mean that someone who is retired and living in a house with significant market value would net see their contribution go down significantly.
Yeah, how it affects each individual depends on their income and the value of their house and what community they live in. But there is a group of people who overall will pay more taxes and a group who will pay less. And generally, the higher earners will pay more than they do now, and lower earners will pay less than they do now, which is a great result. It is also true that property tax just hurts more, even if you're paying the same, because you have to write 4 big checks a year instead of having it come out every week out of your paycheck every 2 weeks, or whatever other arrangement you have.
So last question on this front. I've heard property taxes described as wealth taxes for non-rich people. Is there any consideration, any potential traction for wealth tax on non-property forms of wealth as part of this mix?
Yeah, ideally, it would be great to tax wealth because at a certain point, that's what really matters. And that's what really determines an individual or family's ability to pay, how much they can contribute to the community. It's a pain in the neck, and states have tried it, but especially property, real estate's the easiest part of wealth to tax because you can see it.
The ground.
Yeah, exactly. You can drive by it and look at it, and what like taxing. There are all sorts of ways that rich people can hide their wealth, and they do. It's squirreled away overseas. It's here, and a painting, a 200-year-old painting on the wall of someone's house. How do you know what it's worth? And how do you know it's there? Right? There's all these forms of wealth that are hard to track. Florida tried it. They tried a wealth tax and they implemented it. They ran it for a few years. It wasn't working at all. Then they sort of made it voluntary, which made it even worse. And then they got rid of it. So it's hard. And I think certainly beyond our capabilities as a state to sort out.
Bram, I know it's early in the process, but there's a certain degree of property that is owned by out-of-staters that if it takes away from the property tax, then that money would not be coming in because they live out there and we wouldn't have an income tax come in. Has anybody had a chance to sort of weigh what's the net gain of those properties?
Yeah, so the switch to income tax would only apply to homesteads, which is to say primary residences owned by the inhabitant thereof. Other properties are subject to the non-homestead tax rate. And right now we only have 2, homestead and non-homestead. But there is discussion about parsing that into more nuances. And putting in a higher rate for, say, vacation homes that sit empty most of the year. A
But
higher,
probably not camps because
not camps.
that is a very political
Yeah.
tension right
And, like,
there.
how you figure out the difference
I know.
between a camp and a vacation home, I don't know. But yes, thank you for that. That's absolutely, whenever anyone says that, they always say, but not camps, because they know that if they try to crank up the tax on camps, they're likely to end up in a hunting accident.
Yeah.
But and you know, there's some talk about a higher rate for short-term rentals, the Airbnbs of the world. You know, there's some talk about, do we do a lower rate on manufacturing properties because we want to encourage manufacturing jobs in the state and so forth. So there is some energy around having more non-homestead property tax rates than just the single one that's there now. Jack.
Questions on
Oh, sorry.
taxes? Yeah.
Moderating, not me.
I also noticed,
Okay.
I can, oh,
says, can you say more about who/where people should be directing that pressure to support the effort to move us to a more progressive tax?
yeah.
That question came in
Probably in that discussion.
Okay, so why don't I take that one and then we'll go to Jack, if that's okay. So that's a great question, and Tiff has been coaching me that every time we say anything, we should say, call the governor, please. Call the governor. Please call the governor's office. Put pressure on the governor. The governor is not likely to be enthusiastic about this. I actually have not heard him say that, but it is quite likely he will not be enthusiastic. You know, I think the chair of the chairs of the two tax committees, in the House, it's the Ways and Means Committee, Emily Kornheiser from Brattleboro's chair, and Senate Finance, Ann Cummings is still chair, is that correct? Yes, Senator Ann Cummings.
Supposedly.
What's that?
Ostensibly,
Supposedly, yes.
nobody's, it hasn't
Yes,
been finalized.
actually, right. We should say that our committee assignments are entirely at the pleasure, in the House, entirely at the pleasure of the Speaker. And there's a competitive race for Speaker. And so Tiff and I actually don't know what committees we're going to end up, nor does anyone else, or who the chairs are going to be.
And
However,
there will be different makeup because Republicans gain a lot of seats. And so there may be some chairs that are Republican where they were Democratic in the last session. And that's true of the Senate too.
Jack?
I just had more like comments, and if or like gut reaction comments, and if I'm wrong or I'm missing something, let me know. But so the first one on the question of like retirement income, like moving to an income-based system, I think about, like, broadly speaking, Vermont has a relatively old population, like it's aging, I think, currently, or at least last I heard. So like when I think about like moving to a to an income base, and I think this might speak to maybe where some of this pressure is coming from, and where the pain is coming from more broadly. If you move to a system where like income has to cover it, and a good number of residents have low or fixed or like, no real tangible income, and you still have to pay the same bill, and we're not doing anything that really, and maybe the healthcare gets to it to some degree, but you're not dealing with the spending part. I think that puts a lot of pressure on young people who are not just young people, people who are currently working or in their most productive kind of income years, where then that makes it even harder for them to get established, which also ties into the housing situation, right? So like, I think we kind of have this system where like, there's a lot conspiring against people putting down roots. There's a lot of people like fighting to move here or fighting to stay here and finding lots of reasons to get pushed out. And so like, that's just like this gut reaction kind of to this that I have. And the second one is a little more like wonky, which is just that like, and also just like full disclosure, it kind of does get a little too market oriented in ways and doesn't fully appreciate all of the aspects of a house and a home. But like from a big picture perspective, when we're talking about the housing issue that we have, property taxes are like or just, you know, the taxes that are kind of paid on the properties and that the homes and the buildings and the structures is actually like a really good market signal to like push towards utilizing space best. So like, so something like that I think of in my head, and again, not keeping in mind who's living there and the specific people and the stories and the life that they're living, but like if you have like someone who doesn't make a lot of money living on a half acre in the middle of downtown Burlington and there's no property tax pressure to like use that better, like it just it ends up being really bad in the long term for like how we actually collectively utilize space, because you kind of get these individual decisions where it like makes a lot of sense for one person, but like the city as a whole or the towns as a whole kind of are not I guess I don't know. I know this like it sounds kind of really mean to say,
Yeah,
but I'm
no.
saying from a systems level perspective, it can cause the inverse of what you'd want, which is like, oh, you know, I have this really prime location, you know, and I'm paying a lot of taxes because it could support 100 units on my half acre in downtown, and there's like a natural pressure to like do that. And if you get rid of that, then you don't have that.
Yeah, no,
Anyway,
you're right, but you know, the market pressure will be there, right? Like someone's living on that half acre, people are gonna be knocking on their door saying, hey, I'll give you a bunch of money for your land.
yeah.
Because I'm gonna put 100 units on it and that'll be helpful. And you know, in terms of like young people who are earning, you know, if they're young and kind of at the beginning of their earnings curve, you know, it's going to be a progressive income tax. So, you know, they'll be at the lower brackets. If they're young and they're making a ton of money, then they'll be at the higher end, right? It's age agnostic. And, you know, to your point about older people aging out of the workforce and retiring and having their income drop, and then their property taxes keep going up the way they have been, you know, those are the people who are losing their homes that they've been in for decades. And, you know, as we've all talked about in housing, and as we will, they don't have any really good options around here. You know, if they want to stay in Vermont, there aren't places they can downsize into with lower taxes. They have to go to New Hampshire or Tennessee or, you know, the other places people go when they can't bear the cost of living here anymore. So
I guess I just want to, my gut, or the thing that I was trying to bring up is to like make sure that we're not just trading one for the other, and to make sure that it's something that like makes it so that people who are of all ages and of all income levels can kind of stay, and there's not undue burden, right? It's like if there's, I guess what I'm saying is like if there's like a big chunk more than normal that like can't or would not be paying in as much into this, that like that the fair high taxes becomes even higher. And I don't know, it's just
We should shift gears to healthcare. And I'm noting that, and this is my bad, we put an early adjourn time on the agenda of 7 minutes ago. So I noticed Pat just had to leave. Totally fine if folks need to slip out. Why don't we
We could stop
move?
talking and just open it up for, you know, comments.
Yeah, so
Hopes.
would people like to share pressing questions, concerns, ideas related to these three topics, or really anything for the legislature? And then we can circle back to I'm sure the two remaining topics are going to be on the list of healthcare and education, so, or housing, I mean.
Yeah.
So let's open it up, and if other folks have questions or thoughts, let's get those on the table.
No question, but I do want to hear about healthcare. So,
Yeah. All right.
well, I guess I have
Go
kind
ahead,
of
David.
both. I get to turn 65 next year. And there's all these questions right now about SSI and, you know, Vermont still is like one of 13 states that taxes Social Security.
After a certain level.
Right. And I mean, somebody like me, I'm in a special housing low-income housing and I'm gonna go from a Medicaid. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just saying, I'm gonna go from a situation where I have low-income housing and I'm gonna go from a Medicaid-based healthcare system transitioning into a Medicare system. And there's already a lot of medications that are being dropped from Medicare and stuff like that. And how is somebody going into those upper ages gonna juggle paying for housing, paying for food? And I mean, I think there's gotta be some kind of change in try to not tax Social Security or something like that. I don't know what we're gonna do about that revenue, but it seems like we are heading toward an older population. So that older population has less money and we're gonna have even less money because of all the changes that are coming on. And all the scary thoughts coming from the Trump administration wanted to eliminate housing, eliminate medical issues. I mean, our hospitals are in crisis right now. It seems like we put all our eggs in one basket in the past. And now it's coming to roost where we gotta do something about one or the other, and we're close to being wiped out as a small state because of the age thing and lack of money. Nobody wants to build a company, bring a company to Vermont because they're scared of the business side of it.
So David, I'm hearing issues in there related to healthcare and affordability. Can we take that as a pivot to ask Bram to give us an update on what's coming down the pike with healthcare? Because that might be the best answer to some of these questions you're raising.
Do you know the income limit below which we do not tax Social Security?
You know, I think it's somewhere near $50,000 per individual. Is that right?
I don't think you get $50,000 a year in Social Security. That's way above the max.
I think that must include other.
Oh, including all income.
Yeah, total income.
Even if you use Social Security and everything else.
Yeah.
Got it. So your Social Security only gets taxed if you have more than $50,000 coming in a year.
Yeah. It's been a long time. I think I talked about that in my first year and I haven't really.
It pretty much close to that because the provisional income that you can have with Social Security, you know, is $25,000.
Yeah.
Around that figure would be capped.
Yeah.
So healthcare, man, you thought you were Debbie Downer. Healthcare, so, you know, it is possible that Trump will succeed in getting rid of Obamacare this time around. He came within a vote or two last time, and the Republicans in the US Senate have become rather less courageous than John McCain was. So it seems quite possible that Obamacare will be repealed, which will mess a lot of us up. And, you know, the subsidies for the exchange are ending a year from now, I think. And if they are not renewed, that will mess a lot more of us up. So it is quite possible that we will have a lot of uninsured Vermonters who don't have access to health care other than through the emergency room, which is an ineffective and very expensive way and an unpleasant experience to go through if it's not necessary. And then, you know, Medicaid and Medicare provide health coverage to a lot of Vermonters. I think Medicare is probably at less risk than Medicaid, just because older people have more political power than poor people do. Was there a question? No, just,
Question on healthcare, but if you want to finish
yeah, yeah. And even absent all that, I was just in a meeting with the hospital execs and you know, there are a lot of people working hard to control the costs in the system and make healthcare more affordable for everyone. And it is very difficult. The Green Mountain Care Board is, sets the amount that insurance companies can charge. It sets the hospital budgets, it has to approve those. It has held the hospital budgets to a couple percent a year. The insurance companies, it's been granting them 15% increases because the Green Mountain Care Board is convinced if they don't, the health insurance companies, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont, will not be able to provide insurance. It won't be able to function, and MVP will leave the state. I think TRICARE, which provides health coverage to active military and to vets, the VA, I think are all probably pretty safe. But it is a concerning landscape, and I really don't know, since so much of it is federal dollars and federal policy, I don't know how much the legislature can do to protect Vermonters who are at risk of losing coverage.
Why don't we go to the question online?
Is there any appetite for building support around Act 47 and creating a healthcare for all program, or studying the economic potential of the enormous contributions schools and other employers have to make to private health insurance to fund a public option?
Hard to know. I mean, it's hard to know if there's an appetite for it because we haven't convened and we don't, there are a number of new legislators, and we're going to have to get to know them. I think, well, I've talked with the health advocate, who's based at Legal Aid, Mike Fisher, who used to head House Healthcare Committee. And he doesn't believe that Vermont alone can shoulder the cost of a single payer, all payer system. That it is, unless Vermont, partnered with several other states, it just isn't feasible. And that's what they found during the Shumlin administration. And, there are many aspects of this problem. You've got health insurance premiums, which are really out of reach for many people, employers, and for individuals. You've got the fact that there are a number of people who may lose insurance that was made affordable through Obamacare, and you've got a hospital system that is on very shaky financial footing. What is it? 9 of the 14 are in real financial risk. Blue Cross Blue Shield is putting out way more money than it typically does, and it's I don't know, its reserves are going down because of the claims. So the Green Mountain Care Board did this report, presented its analysis, recommended a number of things, including, really centralizing certain kinds of services, and which would make it less accessible, healthcare oh my God, I can't talk tonight, less accessible to folks in rural areas, pitting rural against urban needs. And now it goes to AHS. So the governor and the administration have the responsibility for responding to that report and coming up with a plan. And I'm going to be very frank, I'm really cynical about the ability of the administration to come up with a plan. You know, we don't have much time, according to this report. And I think those departments are really pulled in 1,000 different directions right now. So finding a way, we have to, all of us have to insist that we put our best feet forward, which means that we're open to listening to proposals that we consolidate, whether it's schools as it relates to education spending, or it's you know, medical centers. Maybe we don't need 14 hospitals in the state. Maybe we need to establish kind of basic primary care in certain parts of the state. But if you're living in Newport and you know, we recommission your hospital to something that is not, you know, where you have to go further for dialysis or whatever, how are you going to feel? And this is so, I'm glad it's not in the hands immediately of the legislature, because I think that some of those battles need to be fought in a less political arena.
So in the interest of time, it sounds like we have potential for improvements on the tax front. There's at least a possible way forward. Healthcare is in a little bit of a holding pattern because the elephant is what happens at the federal level. And then, but it's hard, is what it sounds like. Why don't we shift to housing and talk a little bit about priorities there and what you see as opportunities and challenges?
So we've made a huge investment in housing over the last, really since the pandemic, because that enabled us to invest dollars, close to $1 billion in either emergency housing, rental support, or new housing construction. And since 2019, we've built 11,000 units. Doesn't sound like very many though, does it? Especially when VHFA, the Vermont Housing Finance Agency, says we need 35,000 units by 2030. And so, you know, I think we did some very good things as it relates to permitting and zoning that will free developers up to create multi-unit housing in places where only, you know, single family homes were zoned for, or rehabbing abandoned or not up to code buildings that can be then turned into rental housing. We have a rental revolving loan fund to build rental housing that then it would be rented out at an affordable rate. But the needs are huge. And we underinvested for about, well, really almost since we established the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, and at a time very much like this, when Vermonters were looking around and Governor Cunin said, who's living here is going to be able to stay here unless we actually invest in affordable housing. So I think we're going to have the property transfer tax, which funds affordable housing right now, is going to come in higher than it did last year, but not nearly high enough to build the kind of housing that we need to build, that is affordable. I think that we can incentivize development in new ways with the Act 250 reform and with certain incentives like water and sewer development money. But we really need about $100 million a year for about 10 years to build the kind of housing. And this is not my estimate, it's a Champlain Housing Trust put this together. And the only way that we could figure out to do that last year was to raise, um, raise the income tax on basically 1% of Vermonters. And this would be at $500,000 or more. Right now, the highest tax bracket goes from about 245 to whatever. And we passed that as the House. It wasn't, all that easy, but but the Senate didn't take it up. So I think the Senate is going to be an even harder sell this year. And I just want to ask a question. How many of you write your senators? Okay. All right. How many of you write the folks who you send to the House? Okay. Well, I think that the Senate and the House are going to have to work together, and they're going to have to get the same messages from you. I think housing, I think we're on a good trend, but it's slow, and we're not going to see, we're not going to see a huge difference in the number of units available and the vacancy rate for a while. And I think there is, every single person I talk to, and I'm sure it's true for you, Bram, named housing as the number one concern, usually right above property taxes. So one of the things that I think Bram and I need to try to do is invite your advocacy where it matters. I don't know who's going to be the chair of the housing committee, nor in the House, nor what they are thinking about and what stomach Ways and Means has for trying to raise taxes at a time we're also trying to build housing and provide supportive services in the ways that we would need to for some of that housing, and fix education finance, and maybe anticipate cuts in what people will be getting through the health exchange. So,
It's one question back there.
Fareed.
Ask about, want to ask about some of the charter changes that Burlington has passed, if there's an update on either the just cause eviction or the more recently passed one on police police disciplinary action.
Well, that hasn't gotten to the that will arrive when we convene in January. Just cause eviction, we have really tried hard to get, but that it is not going to be popular. It is going to be very difficult, much more difficult this time to get through, given the makeup of the legislature. And it was very hard even last year, which is why government ops decided not to take it up. But we were able to fund and will be able to continue to fund rental arrears program and rental subsidies for folks, and legal representation, at least in 2 counties, for folks who are facing eviction, which help to that, to that end of things. But it is, it's just going to be different, and it's really hard to know how different. The one good thing is that, like, we all heard the same messages, so we have to do something about all of these three issues, right? So there might even be a little more alignment than there has been in the past. So, uh, I guess I have a question of folks here, which is, how do you want to hear from us? How useful is what we would post in Front Porch Forum or through our emails? What are they too long? What kind of, I mean, how much information do you want?
Combination of your posting on Front Porch Forum and coming to talk to us and answering our questions been working great for me.
So I'll just make a comment. One of the things, Tiff, that I've really liked in Bram is the Sunday night Zoom calls that you've had. You've brought in like the right experts and stuff to talk, and I've just found those really informative, and for the most part, a convenient time, to do things. I'm not a Saturday morning coffee person. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Well, we're at 8:30, which is our usual stop time. And again, apologies for not noticing that we'd said we'd do an earlier stop time. I've been out of town recently, so I was not in the loop on planning and should have noticed, so completely on me. But we really should adjourn now. Obviously, folks are welcome to hang around and chat some more. And huge thank you to both of you. Small picture for showing up tonight and talking with us, and big picture for your service in the legislature and the intelligence and compassion and dedication that you bring to that work.
I second that. You guys have a nice frame of mind, I think, and understand what's ahead of us.